Okay, welcome back. I'm Cappadocia. Welcome to a brand new series. This is Plane Facts. Now, the idea behind this, essentially, to merge two of my biggest passions: gaming and military history. So, what I'm going to do is basically zone in on the particular aircraft, where the game gets it right, where the game gets it wrong. Now, this is the Gloster Goldfinch. Now, it's unusual. I'm not quite sure why they picked the Goldfinch specifically. It is an all-metal version of the Gloster Gamecock, which at the start you can see when the chassis, the original chassis is the Gamecock chassis, and essentially they took the Gamecock, wanted an all-metal variant of it, called it Goldfinch, and it was designed as a high-altitude fighter. Not a multi-role, not a fighter bomber. It was designed purely as a fighter. And the Gamecock came in the 20s. It was developed by the Gloster Aircraft Company purely as it was an uneven span biplane with mixed fabric and metal construction. I believe it was Folland? Folland that designed it? Pretty sure it was Folland. I know it flew in 27. That was its first flight up. Yeah, it was an uneven span biplane. I know it used a Bristol Jupiter engine, but I can't remember which version, so forgive me for that. 2303 machine guns mounted in the front. Now, they wanted a metal version of it, because the Gamecock itself wasn't a bad little fighter. But, yeah, it did quite well. It's Goldfinch that had the... Oh, well. No, but anyway, the Goldfinch had the Jupiter engine and was designed by Folland. I can't remember the Gamecock designation, but anyway... I think it used the Jupiter as well. Not entirely sure. But it came from the Grebe, the Gloster Grebe, if I'm pronouncing that one right. And it was designed as a fighter aircraft. It wasn't designed to be a fighter bomber. According to... Well then, it was pretty good. As a fighter aircraft for the 20s, it wasn't bad. Obviously, things were changing, progressing rather rapidly in certain areas. Biplanes in some areas would be going out of fashion, even though they get the advantage of the biplane over a monoplane, especially at this point, was the extra lift and the turning ability. But the extra drag on the wings meant that you weren't going to go as quickly, and in an age where fighter aircraft were predominantly starting to get faster and faster and faster and faster and faster, which would culminate in things like the World War II era fighters that we all know. At this point, mobility was still a big thing, so being able to duck, dive, twist and turn was very, very important. This is what they learned from World War One at the time, because obviously we're talking about design and build. Flew in 27, I think it was 25. 25 for the Gamecock, 27 for the Goldfinch. I'm sure on that bit, yeah. Yes, I haven't got my book in front of me. Otherwise I'd be reading it. But it was the Gamecock did well. It was a pretty good machine. It flew, it ducked. It was praised for its manoeuvrability. It was also kind of praised for its speed because it was faster than some other aircraft. But like I said, this was during the mid 20s, and pretty soon speed was going to go off the goddamn chart. So it was designed to be a tight and twisty fighter. Pretty soon it was easily outmatched in speed very shortly afterwards, but it could hold its own because it could move. Only had two 303 caliber machine guns mounted on the front. I'm pretty sure they were Vickers. I'm not entirely sure. More than likely, because most of the guns that we used at this point were Vickers machine guns, and they were mounted internally to try and make it a bit more aerodynamic. So, not mounted in the wings, because obviously got more wings, no way of doing that at the time, but mounted on the cowling, on the front, with the gun inside, rather than on things like the Bristol Scouts from World War One, where you had the gun literally mounted on the top of a wing on the SE-5 Scout aircraft, Scout Experimental 5, where you'd reach up, cock it. Yeah, I mean, a lot of our guys liked it. It was quick for compared to what they were used to, and very tight, very nimble, the gamecock, but it was made of wooden fabric, which obviously causes problems when you're shooting at things with heavier weapons, where anti-aircraft guns were becoming a lot more useful, a lot more of a thing, rather than converted artillery guns. They were being specifically designed to do so. So you're looking at, even though flak shells, flaming onions, things like that were well known from World War One, they were generally modified artillery rather than pure anti-aircraft guns, especially at the start. Because especially at the start of the war, why are you going to bother on something that hasn't been proven? But yeah, the gamecock was liked by its pilots. They did enjoy flying it, and it wasn't too bad, really. There were lots of different variants of it. There was a two-seater, but there weren't many made. There was also the Gambit, which was the carrier-based version, which was a private venture. Japan basically took it, used it, renamed it, well, Nakajima, as the AM-1. So yeah, it was a good little plane, but it had drawbacks, purely because of its construction methodology using wood and fabric. It could only stay quite low. So the RAF, which was still fairly new at this point, you got to remember. I mean, the RAF was only founded in, what was it, 17? No, 13, 1913, something like that. I think it was 12. Yeah, I think it was 13, 14. Anyway, not really relevant. But the RAF is only a decade and a bit old, and what they wanted was something as a high altitude fighter, high altitude interceptor. And so they asked Bristol to come up with an all-metal construction with a more powerful engine. I've got something telling me they put the Jupiter 7 in the Goldfinch. Something's telling me it was the 7. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. So they upgraded them through to the latest version of the Bristol Jupiter engine, threw it in, made an all-metal construction of it. But it never got past the prototype stage. Mostly because the ceilings that they were looking at for high altitude wasn't really going to work in 1925. Things like oxygen masks weren't a thing. So going too high up didn't really make much sense. So while the all-metal construction would have given it a bit more solidarity, would have given it a bit more armour, in a sense. Though not really, because it still would have been flimsy metal. It wouldn't have been thick. We're not talking like Spitfire armour or anything like that, purely because they couldn't have the edges to get the weight into the air. So yeah, they threw it together, they built it, they tested it. It didn't work. So it's quite strange, I think, that they've gone for the Goldfinch in this particular instance. The Gamecock I could have understood. If they want to move a bit further forward, there were other planes around. I mean, things like the Gloster Gladiator, things like that, but that wasn't in production at this point, but in 1925, but you get what I mean. There were other aircraft they could have gone for. And what I don't understand is why they've made the aircraft specifically a fighter bomber, or a multi-role, as they call it, as the modern definition is. Back in the day, fighter bomber. Because it wasn't. It wasn't a fighter bomber. It didn't have hard points to strap bombs to underneath. At least nothing that I found in my research has indicated as such. If anybody knows any different, please let me know. I know there was a two-seater at one point, which they could possibly have used as a fighter bomber, basically burned by the old-fashioned way of the guy in the back probably using a gun on a scaffolding, and then when they fly over, just chuck things out of the aircraft. But I don't think there were any specific fighter bomber variants of the Gamecock. The Goldfinch had two variants, despite only one ever being made. There were two variants of it. They did adjust it, but yeah, it never really got that far. I mean, the Gamecock topped out at around, what was it, 155, 160, somewhere around there, miles an hour. And I'm pretty sure it could only go up to about 5 maybe 6,000 feet. Which is normal. I think it could go higher. I think its theoretical ceiling was a lot higher than that, but I don't think it ever really went up that high. I mean, unpressurized cockpit, all of that gubbins, not going to do your pilot too good in that. You know, going up to like 15,000, something like that. Yeah, it's not going to do too well. But yeah, and two 303 Vickers machine guns built into the front. The Goldfinch, I don't really think they ever found out too much, but I do know it's maxed out 100, just shy of 150 knots, I believe. Again, two Vickers machine guns synchronized on the front, but it never went into production. The Goldfinch, it just didn't. So there wasn't really that continuation from the Gamecock to the Goldfinch, because other aircraft had come along, other aircraft had become available, and the Goldfinch concept, for the height they wanted to get on it, it was just unfeasible. So the game does get a few things right with the Goldfinch. It is pretty agile. It's you know, it bimbles. It's not fast, as you can see. But the one thing, the major thing to get wrong is the fact that it's got a bomb strapped to the bottom of it, which it should not have. The Goldfinch was not a multi-role. Like I said, she was a fighter. She was a purebred fighter. That's what they wanted her for. The Gamecock and the Goldfinch, so both variants, were fighters. So strapping bombs to the bottom of a fighter does not make it a multi-role. It's designed to be a fighter. It basically, the trade-off comes in. When you look at traditional multi-role aircraft, there's always a trade-off, because you've got to have hard points built in. Those hard points add weight. They external munitions such as bomb racks add drag, so you're going to lose speed, you're going to lose maneuverability. Most multi-roles lean into that, make up for it with heavier armour, sometimes more guns, things like that, because basically it's like, well, it's not going to outrun a purebred fighter, it's not going to outturn a purebred fighter, because of its external bomb racks, so what does it matter? So they lean into it a little bit more, you can juice up the engine, things like that, but for the most part, they're going to be heavier, they're not as nimble, not as fast, and they don't climb as well. So with this particular variant on the game, it doesn't climb very well, it doesn't turn very well, but these were things that the Gamecock and the Goldfinch could do. They could get up quick, they could fight, that's what they were there for. They weren't designed to fly in and knock out defences. So, yeah, there's a few problems with the variant that the warplanes are using. Essentially, it's incorrect. If you're looking at it purely from a game design, I understand, because during the early point, you need to because it's a level 1 aircraft, so you need to learn how to fly it. You need to, get your eye on the bombs, stuff like that, and know how to do. Oh, so I can understand why they've done that, but it is not correct at all. She should be a pure fighter aircraft, so she should just be dogfighting. She shouldn't be bombing, shouldn't be doing any of that. In their position, I'm unsure why, like I said, they chose the Goldfinch as the name, because it should have been the Gamecock, which was the mass-produced fighter aircraft. The Goldfinch, they only ever made one, the prototype. That was all there ever was. So, quite why they've picked to use the Goldfinch name on it is, again, one of those things I don't quite get. As there were multiple Gamecocks. The Gamecock was a standard fighter. It was one of the RAF's mainline fighters. The Goldfinch never got there. So it's a bit bizarre to me to be using the Goldfinch, the upgraded variant as the name. Well, not even upgraded, but the development as the name, rather than the one which would have been seen in the skies. They've picked just a prototype name. I know there's other aircraft in there that are just prototypes, and I'll come across them later, but this particular one I feel wasn't really the best selection and the best option for what the plane was. Personally, I would have just made it an out-and-out fighter, which is what she was. So, in the case of the game, instead of having the teardrop and bomb racks, she'd have just had the diamond and would have just had her guns. The guns are correct. Obviously, two 303 Vickers firing through the propeller. It also does have the right propeller. It was a dual-bladed propeller. So that's correct as well. So the actual alignment, also, there's one thing they didn't get in there. At least I don't recall them getting it. I'm not looking at the aircraft right at the moment myself, but I'm pretty sure they didn't have the altercation in the wing. The bottom wing is quite square on a Gamecock and on the Goldfinch, where the top wing is very curved. So there's a complete differential between the two wings, and again, that's design reasoning, help generate lift, try and reduce drag. By doing that, you make the plane faster. You want more lift on the wings, so that way when you're banking, the plane will turn quicker. Things like that, that's all good. So you want lift, but you also need to reduce drag. And lift and drag coefficient, I'm not going to get into the science of that. I'll be honest, that's not my area of expertise, and I cannot be bothered to try and look it up. But it doesn't quite ring true. I mean, the plane that was selected instead of the Goldfinch was the Bristol Bulldog, which, again, is in the game. But that was what realistically took the job of the Goldfinch, and the Goldfinch was never produced. So, realistically, as a Grade 1, they could have used the Gamecock, but it should have been a pure fighter, shouldn't have been a fighter bomber. And on top of that, using the Bulldog as the level 2 is the plane that in 1927 was selected over the Goldfinch. So the Goldfinch never saw service. In fact, it didn't meet what the RAF wanted it to do. It couldn't meet the requirements. The Bulldog did. Ish. I'll come on to that in another video. But yeah, so there's lots of things wrong with what they've done with this particular variant in the game. Not the best of stars, but to play and to fly, it's not too bad. It's a bit slow. It turns well, so that's a bit of a the guns don't really do an awful lot. I mean, you can see in some of these shots on here, I'm peppering away at heavies for ages and doing next to nothing with 2 303 machine guns, but that was pretty much its life. Yeah, it wasn't designed to go up against armoured aircraft. It was designed originally, the Gamecock was to take on other wood and fabric aircraft. So you shoot holes in them, they go down. Anything armoured with 2 303s on the front, just firing normal lead slugs, you pepper it away all day and it's not going to do that much. Found this out during World War II, realistically, with the 303 caliber weapons that we were still using before cannons were put onto the aircraft. I mean, admittedly, the Spitfire 1 did have cannon on it, but the pilots didn't like it. It had a tendency to jam, overheat. Again, that's a story for a different time. But they wanted it back with 303s. The problem with 303 is you have to put a lot of lead down range in order to damage anything with armour. And so with the Gamecock going up and the Goldfinch, if it had going up against other aircraft, anything with armour on it, with 2 machine guns strapped to the nose, you're not going to do that much damage. And that was part of the problem for it. But let's summarise up so far. So they got the category wrong. They got most of the specs meh, kind of wrong. It does turn well, which the real plane did, but it was not as quick as the real plane, which is a problem, and it can't do the height the real plane did in the game. So, yeah, changes. It should have been a fighter. It shouldn't be a fighter bomber or multi-role, and it realistically should be a bit quicker and turn a lot faster and be able to go a bit higher, and its climb rate should be better than it is in the game. Yeah, and also obviously, personally, I wouldn't have selected the Goldfinch at all. The Gamecock, yes, which does start with, and then you buy the chassis to become the Goldfinch. So I do get what they've done there, but it wasn't just a straight evolution. Well, it wasn't a straight, like, take chassis away and bring another chassis in. That means it's a whole new damn plane. It's not like later on with the Spitfire we had the Mark 1, the Mark 2, the Mark 3, the Mark 4, the different variants, which were based on the same chassis, just adapted. This is a whole new chassis going from the Gamecock to the Goldfinch, which is a bit of a problem. But anyway, I'm going to leave that there. So I hope you found that interesting. If you want more like this, let me know. There'll probably be a couple more before anybody picks up on it anyway, but what the hell. But anyway, enjoy the rest of the flight. For the minute, I've been Cappadocia. Signing off.
Has control of all key objects. You cannot leave it like that.